Philippines, a nation known for its vibrant democracy and resilient people, found itself grappling with a contentious chapter under the leadership of Rodrigo Duterte. His presidency, from 2016 to 2022, was marked by a controversial crackdown on drugs that left thousands dead and a nation deeply divided. Duterte's methods, often described as both decisive and autocratic, drew both support and condemnation from various groups worldwide and ultimately brought him face to face with the International Criminal Court. The question that reverberated across the globe was simple yet profound. Will justice prevail? Duterte's rise to power was fueled by a potent mix of populism and a promise to eradicate crime and drugs. His fiery rhetoric resonated with a public weary of lawlessness, propelling him to a landslide victory. Human rights organizations accused Duterte of orchestrating a systematic campaign of extrajudicial killings, targeting the most vulnerable sections of society. The Philippine government, however, remained defiant, dismissing the accusations as Western propaganda and asserting its sovereignty. Duterte himself seemed unfazed by the criticism, even encouraging the killings, infamously declaring, "If you know of any addicts, go ahead and kill them yourself, as getting their parents to do it would be too painful." The United Nations, human rights groups, and foreign governments issued statements of concern, urging Duterte to end the violence and respect human rights. However, their pleas seemed to fall on deaf ears, leaving many to wonder if there was any way to hold Duterte accountable for the actions under his administration. Duterte's war on drugs, launched with much fanfare and public support, quickly became a highly controversial campaign. It operated on a premise to eliminate drug users and dealers by any means necessary, which some saw as a necessary measure. The police, emboldened by Duterte's rhetoric and promises of impunity, became the instruments of this campaign, leading to both support and criticism. Nightly raids, often based on intelligence or the actions of vigilante groups, became commonplace. The government's official death toll stood at over 6,000, but human rights groups estimated the actual number to be much higher, possibly exceeding 30,000. Adding to the horror, the killings were often carried out with chilling brutality. Critics argued that this was a war without rules, where due process and the presumption of innocence were sacrificed at the altar of expediency. The Philippine justice system, already grappling with corruption and inefficiency, faced challenges in addressing the violence. Duterte's government, however, remained steadfast in its defense of the drug war. They argued that the killings were justified, that the victims were criminals who deserved their fate. They pointed to a decrease in crime rates as evidence of the campaign's success, while critics highlighted the human cost. The international community, however, was divided in its response. The United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights called the killing systematic, widespread, and shocking, while human rights organizations accused Duterte of crimes against humanity. Supporters, however, viewed the campaign as a necessary step to restore order and safety. As the situation in the Philippines escalated, the International Criminal Court, a court of last resort established to prosecute individuals for genocide, crimes against humanity, war crimes, and crimes of aggression, took notice. The ICC's involvement marked a significant escalation in the international community's response to Duterte's drug war, signaling that the world was watching and that impunity would not be tolerated. In 2018, the ICC's then prosecutor, Fatu Bensouda, announced the opening of a preliminary examination into the situation in the Philippines. This initial step, while not a full-blown investigation, was significant as it signaled the ICC's concern about the gravity of the crimes being committed. Duterte, perceiving this as an infringement on Philippine sovereignty, responded with characteristic defiance. He immediately withdrew the Philippines from the Rome Statute, the treaty that established the ICC, in a move seen by some as an attempt to shield himself and his allies from international scrutiny. However, the ICC maintained that it retained jurisdiction over crimes committed, while the Philippines was still a member, a stance that would set the stage for a legal and political battle. The ICC's investigation, launched in 2021, focused on allegations of extrajudicial killings and other crimes committed in the context of the drug war. Prosecutors gathered evidence from various sources, including witness testimonies, police reports, and even Duterte's own public statements, in which he openly encouraged the killings. The evidence, according to the ICC, pointed to a widespread and systematic attack against a civilian population, meeting the threshold for crimes against humanity. Duterte and his supporters, however, argue that the actions were necessary to combat the severe drug problem in the country and maintain public order. Section 4. Manila's Defiance. A stand against international scrutiny. Duterte's successor, Ferdinand Marcos Jr., son of the late Ferdinand Marcos Sr., inherited a nation grappling with the legacy of the drug war and facing mounting international pressure over human rights. Marcos Jr., eager to distance himself from the excesses of his predecessor while also consolidating his power, faced a delicate balancing act. He opted for a strategy of cautious defiance, acknowledging the need to address human rights concerns while rejecting the ICC's jurisdiction and maintaining that the Philippines could handle the situation domestically. This stance, while seemingly contradictory, reflected the complex political realities facing Marcos Jr. He could ill afford to alienate Duterte's supporters, who remained a potent force in Philippine politics, but also had to contend with international pressure and the demands for justice from the families of the victims. The Philippine government argued that the ICC's intervention was a violation of its sovereignty and an affront to its justice system. They maintained that domestic mechanisms were sufficient to investigate and prosecute any crimes related to the drug war. Critics, however, argued that these claims rang hollow. They pointed out that the Philippine justice system, plagued by corruption, inefficiency, and a lack of independence, had a dismal track record in holding perpetrators of human rights abuses accountable. Few investigations into the drug war killings had resulted in convictions, and those that did were mostly for minor offenses. The lack of accountability, both domestically and internationally, fueled a sense of impunity and emboldened those who perpetrated the killings. However, supporters of the government's stance believed that the Philippines should be given the opportunity to resolve these issues internally without external interference. Navigating the political landscape surrounding the International Criminal Court's investigation into former Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte is complex. On one side, supporters argue that Duterte's war on drugs was a necessary measure to combat rampant crime and drug abuse in the country. They claim that the aggressive approach has led to a significant decrease in crime rates and has made communities safer. They view the ICC's involvement as an infringement on the Philippines' sovereignty and a challenge to its judicial system. On the other hand, critics argue that Duterte's policies have resulted in widespread human rights abuses, including extrajudicial killings. They believe that the ICC's investigation is crucial for holding those responsible accountable and ensuring justice for the victims. As the investigation progresses, the debate continues. Will the ICC's actions lead to justice, or will they be seen as overreach into a nation's internal affairs? Only time will tell. The pursuit of justice in the case of former President Rodrigo Duterte and the International Criminal Court is a complex and contentious issue. On one hand, there are those who argue that Duterte's war on drugs led to numerous human rights violations and extrajudicial killings. They believe that the ICC's involvement is crucial for holding him accountable and delivering justice to the victims. On the other hand, Duterte's supporters contend that his actions were necessary to combat the rampant drug problem in the Philippines. They argue that the ICC's intervention undermines the country's sovereignty and disregards the context of Duterte's policies. They see his approach as a strong stance against crime and corruption. The path ahead remains uncertain. The ICC's investigation could lead to significant legal and political ramifications, both domestically and internationally. Whether justice will be served, or if it will be perceived as justice delayed and denied, is a question that continues to divide opinions. The world watches closely as this legal battle unfolds. The ongoing conflict between President Rodrigo Duterte and the International Criminal Court raises significant questions about justice and accountability. On one side, Duterte's supporters argue that his actions are necessary to maintain law and order in the Philippines. They believe that the war on drugs has led to a decrease in crime and has made communities safer. On the other hand, critics and human rights organizations contend that Duterte's methods violate human rights and the rule of law. They argue that the extrajudicial killings and lack of due process are unacceptable and demand accountability through international mechanisms like the ICC. The future of this conflict remains uncertain. Will the ICC be able to hold Duterte accountable, or will his administration's stance against international intervention prevail? Only time will tell. Regardless of the outcome, this case highlights the ongoing struggle between national sovereignty and international justice. It serves as a reminder of the complexities involved in holding leaders accountable on a global stage.